you're doing here today?
Transparency in the case and give some reassurance to the community that there was actually some type of perceived justice happening. It's a year later, and because I myself am now facing charges, there's a sentiment within the community for them to drop the charges, not just for myself, but for a host of other people that are facing charges that sprang out of that summer of turmoil. One of the projects that we're with the NFAC, one of the things that we're emphasizing is putting down the guns and picking up our feet. In other words, actually beginning to help our own people internally. One of those things is one of the programs that I put forward was the Feed the Hood program. And that is us going into communities, not just for the less fortunate, but for our people too. Entering into agreements with certain grocery chains, provide us with food and excess groceries that they would normally destroy, that we can actually disseminate amongst our own people. So we're out here today in South Park, right here in Louisville, and as you can tell, we're feeding the community. You know, some folks coming by, it might be the only meal that they'll get. Other places will go with it much more immediate, will dispense groceries. There's a lunch program that we're putting into effect. There's a breakfast program we're putting into effect. And we're doing this across the country. And the individuals who are already members of the NFAC are participating in this, and people who want to support the NFAC are involved in this. We're self-funding ourselves as well as accepting funding from additional spending. So what you're watching is an example of us giving back to the community in such a way that where it really helps us. There's an old saying, if you feed a man for one day, you fill his stomach, but if you teach him how to feed himself, but what we're teaching each other is that it's okay to feed each other. It's okay to take care of each other. This is unifying. This is actually, as I said in the earlier interview, a team building exercise of us learning.
Think about formations, think about militancy. And you're describing something that's very different. Is that new, or is that always been?
It's always been the mission of the NFAC to do three things: protect our community, teach our community, grow and feed our community. We've already proven we can protect the community. Formations demonstrate that. Not randomly, not with violence, not with anything, like not with destruction, but through an organized front that will be formidable against any force. That's been done. That's why those folks take those steps. Now we're moving to the next stage. It's always been the plan. And the plan is now the rolling out of gone over 130 programs simultaneously to address the ills within our community. Because people are always quick to point out what's wrong with our community when we're trying to fix the things that are being done to our community. This is a demonstration now of what we're doing to help ourselves. It's not radically different. As a matter of fact, it's not too much far different than what the Black Panthers did in the 60s when they came out with their health care program, free lunch program, which inspired the free lunch program in the United States today. What we're simply doing is addressing what we still see are needs within our community. We're still an armed militia. But there's, just like the U.S. military, they're not always at war. When they're in garrison, they're doing things such as disaster relief. They're doing things such as ceremony support. They're doing things that still schooling people, still training people. So we're not just about guns. When it comes to our own people, as I said before, we're putting down the gun and we're picking up our people. If the need comes to pick up the guns again, we'll pick them up. I can't answer that question. That's going to be answered by your constituents. We felt the need to pick up the guns before because of mob. We felt the need to pick up the guns because of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and the list goes on. We felt that need. Well, now we feel the need to take care of our people. Should the need arise again, through some circumstance or some situation, we will be there to defend our people.
Obviously, since last year, we've had the case of George Floyd, and officers on prison. Does that change anything? Does that change anything you think in America? Has there been an active change in what you're doing?
I find it that you talk about the George Floyd case, whereas I have very clear recollection of Rodney King. watched that video many times. It was just as graphic. It was just as painful to watch. I find it interesting that almost 30, 40 years later, that it took a videotape like that was broadcast to the world for us to go through a whole trial period that was so blatant that they had no choice but to put him in prison. Has that changed? Nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is the concerted effort of all of us worldwide that we demanded justice. You couldn't blow this one off. The protest, when I said make them uncomfortable, when I said get in the streets and make them uncomfortable, that cry was heard worldwide. And apparently it worked, because there's no way that in spite of all the thousands of other people who've been unlawfully shot by the police or suffered some form of racial brutality, that it took the masses to become uncomfortable was to finally get a police officer convicted. Not just charged, convicted. Since then, you tell me if you think anything has changed. I would disagree with you. I think that that situation had to be addressed. Injustices still happen. People are still falsely imprisoned. Like myself, people are falsely charged. And if I could be so fair as to say, I think everybody here would agree with me, based on race. Because I didn't storm the Capitol. NFAC hasn't killed anybody. Yet you've got groups that are just like us, who have actually planned to kidnap the governor. Or better yet, groups that actually assaulted the U.S. government. And they're not being treated like we are. So has things changed?
How long do you think this garrison lasts?
You're asking the wrong people. You see, we're reactionary. When I turn on the TV and I see, oh my God, what's happening? I didn't say, we go out and make something happen so I can turn on the TV and say, oh my God.
So it's a reaction to whatever events happen.
It's not whatever events happen. You have to understand something. There's a false perception out there that the NFAC is anti-police. We're not. You're leaving off the key word. We're anti-police brutality. When people say you have to stop them, stop us from doing what? What everyone else is doing, exercising their constitutional rights? There's a lot of misperception out there. Oh, they're a hate group. Why is it a crime to love ourselves? We don't hate anybody. We want to be treated as equals. And we want the space and the latitude to determine our own destiny. And for some reason, in the United States, that appears to be a crime.
What do you see as the solution to coming to power?
The truth of the matter is, there are a lot of people out there who say defund the police, which would probably be the stupidest move in the world, because take what you have out of the way, you have anarchy. Every place that the police have stood down, crime has skyrocketed. So you have to realize, even though you're railing against the police, you're doing nothing to improve yourself as a person. So it's a two-way street. If you want the police to go away, then you have to allow us to police ourselves. You have to give us the ability to police ourselves. But until that happens, there's always going to be a need for some form of law enforcement. Now, in its current iteration, the militarization of the police is the problem. The police don't just serve and protect anymore. And since I wore the uniform myself, I've used those weapons and I've seen systems that these people have never seen. When you hand those over to people, just like us, who are getting paid a paycheck to oversee us, and then you give them superior firepower. Now what happens is the human element gets involved. And a lot of people will hide behind the color of law. When they've been given superior firepower, what you've done is you've built an invading force that we're outmanned and we're outgunned. If you want to de-escalate, not defund them, de-escalate.
Try to interrupt the government. You yourselves arming yourselves and buying superior firepower doesn't matter. Just then force them to make the next move and get more military and everything else.
Will. It ain't no fun.
When the railroad has done.
All we've done is equalize the playing field, my brother. And when we go into foreign countries In the U.S. military, the first thing we do is we assess the strength of the enemy. And if the enemy's too strong, we don't go. You're not going to see the United States invade China, no matter what Korea says, because China is their big brother. You're not going to see the United States out and out invade Russia. Why? The Cold War taught us that. So on the streets of America, when you have an armed, invading, occupying force like the police, and then the community arms itself, you saw what happened 5 times. We armed ourselves, and we had a great relationship because it was an equal playing field. If they up the ante, then you leave the population no choice but to up the ante until such a time comes that an ambassador, a representative of the police force collectively, comes to the table to sit down and have a conversation with an ambassador and a representative of the people, and work out some kind of a treaty or an agreement. Then we stay in this silent war. You up the ante is not always a smart move.
Has that ever happened? Have you ever been approached by the police to form dialogue?
Absolutely not.
You'd welcome it?
Would I welcome it? I would tell you the truth first after they drop the charges. It would surprise me. I'd probably have to examine all aspects of it. I'd have to get the buy-in of my brothers and sisters, because it's just like the vote. You don't give your vote away for nothing unless you want something. When I ran for the presidency, I found out you got to go to certain groups and get their buy-in if you want their vote. For so long, we've given away our vote for nothing. If that opportunity was presented to me, I do believe that it would create an atmosphere for a fair dialogue, as long as there's true dialogue. That is not a sleight of hand, and that true change comes out of it. Now, who could be the representative or the ambassador? You tell me. But if they approach to me, I'd have to have the support of all of my constituents to have that conversation.
We talked a lot yesterday about fear. We talked a lot about fear being basically a product of misunderstanding or ignorance in most cases. Do you think what you're describing, that sort of dialogue, would go a long way to dismiss some of the fear and dismiss some of the prejudice?
Absolutely not, and I'll tell you why. Because I told you yesterday, the fear is based on retribution because of the sins of the father. The fear is based on the reparations that are owed to the children of the father. And as long as that's in our DNA, the best thing we can do is equalize the playing field, give what's owed, and then there has to be some form of forgiveness on both sides. Because if things are truly equalized, if reparations are paid, if apologies are issued, treaties are honored, then maybe we can hear that we can coexist in a peace.
I interview a lot of different people from a lot of different groups that have goals and have aspirations. And, you know, a lot of them kind of have these goals and aspirations, but don't ever really believe it's ever really going to happen. And I'm talking about groups like, say, you know, neo-Nazis who want a race war and want, like, the country to be exclusively white and things like that. You can sort of see them talking, but you kind of know that they know that it's never really happened. And when I talk to you, you sound like you 100% believe that these things are going to happen. And I want to ask you about that, right? Because I want to ask you, like, to what extent do you have faith in this country taking these steps in this space? Do you think it'll happen?
The real question is, do I think it'll happen in my lifetime? Naturally, not if it's cut short and it's in my will that way. Do I think it'll happen? It's not, do I think it'll happen in this country? You see, you cannot go to the oppressor or the criminal and say to them, you think you can work things out one day? No. You go to the world court and say, I want to file a grievance against the oppressor. And if the oppressor will honor the authority of the world court and the decisions of the world court to move us down the road to the establishment of a place that we can call our own, which doesn't have to be here in the United States. Additionally, at the same time, also right the wrongs for what you've done to our people. It sets us on a course to that place. The same way when people talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that ongoing conflict really didn't kick up until they established an area for Israel. But before then, it was just conversation. Those people who sit back and say, we want this to happen, but never take steps to make it happen, really don't want it to happen. I told you once before, you got to know the way, show the way, and then go the way. I know the way. I've shown them the way. And now I'm ready to go the way, so are they. It's kind of like going down to the Red Sea and they parted it and nobody wanted to go through. We're ready to go through. Once you take that first step, whether it's the filing of papers with the World Court, addressing the UN, Supreme Council, things of that nature, and bringing the entire world into the discussion, it's very possible. But as long as we're inside of the United States, as long as we continue to be the victims of crimes within the United States, as long as we continue to be victims of human rights violations within the United States, we cannot ask the United States for what we want.
You're talking about revolution.
No, I'm not. Let me explain something about revolution. Revolution is a complete overthrow and a destruction of the existing ecosystem. We haven't advocated that. Not at all. Because if that was the case, there wouldn't have been 5 formations. There would have been 1. And then we'd still be in civil war right now. That's how wars began. Nobody wants a revolution. As a matter of fact, we very much want the United States government intact. Because if they're not intact, they can't repay us reparations. The United States government pays reparations to countries, not to individuals. So in order for them to pay us reparations, we must become citizens of another country, then sue them for reparations. They have to be intact to do that. The reason we can't do that right now, in spite of what everyone else is talking about, as long as you're a citizen, you can't sue yourself. So stop asking the very people that you're a part of to pay you. Doing that means they still own you. And last time I checked, we're not owned anymore. So is it possible? Yes. Do I believe it's possible? Yes. Am I willing to take steps? I started before I was interrupted by these charges that need to be dropped.
I want to ask you a kind of tough question. And I want to ask you respectfully. The work that you do, formations that you hold, we know, I think everybody knows that there's a problem with police brutality in this country. Do you ever worry that people that people of color in this country might see what you're doing, might try to replicate it without your involvement, without your training, and might end up getting themselves into trouble, into bigger trouble than they're already in?
It's already happened. You are a journalist. And you and I have had conversations off record and on the record. The NFAC is very popular. We are the largest all-black armed militia in the world. We have chapters in the UK, across the countries of Africa, the Caribbean, South America, so we're very visible. But there are smaller groups. Some of those groups have more radical ideas. Some of those groups are truly interested in revolution. Some of those groups are interested in harming the police. I would say this, not only to you, to the US government. Do not think that every group is trying to imitate our blueprint. The only thing that they've been able to do is imitate what they've seen. But it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. You have no idea the internal operations, the methodologies, or the policies. As you saw today, how I addressed an allegation of sexual harassment within our organization. Nobody knows what goes on in our house. They only see when we come out. And if all you do is imitate what I'm wearing, you'll never be able to imitate what's inside. So I don't think that the blueprint being imitated by any other group is going to achieve the same result unless you understand the complete process. And that you arrived at this conclusion the same way we did. If you look at us, we're not young. All of us have been here for a little bit. We've seen a few things. We have children. to think about. We have offspring, we have futures to think about. So this for us was a different purpose than someone, let's say, who's very young, and I do have some young members, who may have had an encounter with the police that didn't go right, and that's all they know. They may have never served this country. They may have never worked in corporate America and been discriminated against. They may have never had any of the things that have shaped us as people that cause us to say we are for the betterment of our people, and we're willing to fight and die for it. Everybody doesn't have that same mentality, nor do they have the same philosophy or theology. We're a spiritually connected people. That's the biggest difference. You examine some of these groups, they'll claim to be spiritually connected, but they'll have what we call a perverted theology. Because at the same time that they're espousing this theology, they're willing to sacrifice their own people and achieve nothing.
When you talked earlier about the purpose of this weekend and hoping to get the charges dropped, it sounded like you were offering something in return, which is a dialogue. Am I right in that?
When I look back on history, and I look back at all the other leaders that were assassinated, they had to have a dialogue with the government. They did. Martin Luther King sat with the president. Malcolm X did also. Would I welcome the dialogue? Of course I'd welcome the dialogue. I would be a fool not to welcome the dialogue. But as I said earlier, that dialogue has to be a give and take. I'm bringing some things to the table. You bringing some things to the table. Let us meet in the middle. I speak for millions of people when I say this. And it would be intelligent for them not to ignore me. They've done that for 9 months already. And they're already starting to see cracks in the structure. So would I welcome the dialogue? Of course.
I think you'd also welcome the trial too, right?
Sorry?
You'd welcome the trial too, right?
Nobody welcomes the trial.
No, but I mean you'd at least have your chance to make your argument, to have your say, because right now you're just a victim, right?
In this country, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. We all know that's not true. We live in a court of public opinion. You're convicted before you get there. Do I want my day in court? Why would I want a day in court when I didn't do anything wrong to start with? What I want is for cooler heads to prevail and say, yeah, it might have been hot at the time, and times have changed, the temperatures come down a little bit. Okay, let's just let this one go, and let's look at the positive. Let's have these dialogues we need to move forward. I think that the United States has matured enough and evolved enough that it can have the uncomfortable conversations, no matter what people say, and we have to move away from knee-jerking with our emotions, our feelings. We have to deal with facts. And until that happens, a day in court, why would I welcome a day in court in a system that has proven time and time again that you can be an innocent person and go to prison for decades?
Yeah. I think that's all my questions.
Will, I want to thank you for taking the time, and I thank USA Today for being in the USA Network. I invite you all to stay. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Woo. Hey, see, Will, this that heat. Yeah. If the black folks run up in the White House like the white folks did, man, they would've bust us. They be quick to touch a nigga like a Marion. Matter of fact, burn a nigga ass like Usher.